Hello, my name is Chris Egloff. I'm Vice President of Americase Sales, specializing in hazmat packaging, and I'm also a writing and voting member on the SAE G-27.
Hi, I'm Claude Chanson. I am co-chair of the G-27 committee of the SAE, and my professional activity is I am the Director General for Recharge, the Batteries Industry Association in Europe.
Hi, my name is Wayne Pitt. I'm a member of the SAE committee as a member producer. I work for a manufacturer of lithium cells and batteries, and we've been with the working group since it first began.
Robby Kinsala, CEO of Americase. I'm a liaison to this G27 committee. I'm primarily working with the test team for the round-robin testing and for other testing that has to be done for this committee's purpose.
So I'd like to ask each of you a series of questions so the people watching can have a better understanding of what we're doing at the SAE G27. And I'd like to start with you, Claude, if you wouldn't mind. Could you please briefly tell us about the purpose and objectives of the SAE G27 Lithium Battery Packaging Performance Committee?
So this committee was created by the SAE on purpose, following a request from the ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Authorities, that was looking for a practical method to verify the safety of the lithium batteries when transported by air. And the best way, which was proposed, or one way identified, was indeed to create a committee which target would be to generate a standard of test for verification of the safety of packages containing lithium batteries, in order to make sure that these packages, as presented for transport, would contain the risk from lithium batteries getting in the so-called thermal runaway reaction, which is the main hazard which is worried about when transporting lithium batteries, in order to make sure that these packages are safe for transport. And the committee has then been working on this purpose for the last 7 years.
Thank you, Claude. I appreciate that. In the beginning, was it the intention for it to go on for 7 years?
Well, certainly not. In fact, that's a very good question. We had a committee which was created, as I said, on request of the ICAO, but there was a lot of interest for the industry, as well from the aircraft industries and the authorities. As a result, the committee was joined by, at the moment, I think we have more than 80 people registered on the roster, and making the meetings, let's say, very long and having a lot of opinions to share, which resulted in many years of discussions in order to find a common ground and an agreement on this testing method, testing protocol, making sure on one side that the authorities and the aircraft and pilot industry were, let's say, sufficiently confident that the method of test was ensuring safety, and on the other hand, making the industry recognize that the method was also a practical and enforceable method that they could apply to practically test lithium batteries and packages intended for transport in a way that would not prevent, because of practicality or cost reasons, the shipment of packages by air. So
Maybe
that's also need a long time.
Maybe I could add to that, Chris, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Claude pointed out something very interesting about this type of committee, in the sense that it has many members from industry, many members from regulatory agencies or committees or regulatory agencies around the world, as well as test labs, as well as packaging manufacturers. So when you have this many, not just opinions in the room, but different perspectives to consider, that's one reason why it takes so long to get all the conversations that need to be conducted, throughout this process completed. In another perspective, I think we've learned a lot about things that we didn't know going into the committee writing. So things we know now, not all lithium-ion batteries and cells are created the same. They have different hazard results. State of charge obviously is a big component there, but as well as chemistry and form factor and end use. So all these different layers of complexity have caused the committee to take a lot longer to do due diligence and testing, due diligence in our R&D side, research and development side, as well as reach out to other experts in the industry or in the field to make sure that we had enough evidence to prove that, all of the variables that we're trying to account for can be accounted for. And just to tie that one up is anytime you have a test program or a logical problem to solve like this, when you have multiple variables that can all move independently, the amount of complexity involved gets much more extreme. So that's one reason why it's taken a little bit longer. But I think now that the baseline standard has been published in, I think it was July of 2024, we're making much more progress, much more quickly.
Thank you so much, Robby. I mean, while you're speaking to that, if you wouldn't mind, you said that one of your active roles here is performing a lot of tests that the G-27 has requested several different testing labs to be able to do. Could you talk us through kind of the reasoning of having multiple labs, what type of tests we've done, and how it's contributed to the writing of the standard?
Sure, be happy to. As I mentioned, it's a lot of different types of tests. Obviously, there's a thermal runaway propagation that we're initiating. That's the goal of the test, is to cause thermal runaway to happen inside of the package. And then the hazards that come from that are, sometimes flames, a lot of gas, for sure, and maybe even projectiles if there's a rapid disassembly of the cells. So in order for the package to be able to contain it is one thing, but in order to be able to test for each of those characteristics and potential hazards that could escape a package, we've probably had up to maybe 10 different test labs at any given time, for sure 7 or 8 that were involved heavily throughout the last few years, where we've conducted the similar or exact same type testing in each lab to verify that the way each lab sets up the test, the way each lab prepares the package, the way each lab measures and analyzes the test results is basically the same. And that's taken quite a bit of analysis to prove statistically that each lab, from lab to lab, you get the same results.
Yeah, and these are professional labs. Now, am I correct to understand that I believe in the beginning there were some batteries donated and maybe a couple of funds that went out, but for all the labs that actually support the G-27, is there funding for this, or is this something that each individual lab is just contributing for the greater good of the standard?
I maybe can't speak for every lab, but I think for the majority of the labs that were involved in the majority of the tests, yes, there were initially some cells donated, but since then, early on, I think that we've had to purchase and spend our own resources in order to conduct these tests.
Thank you so much. Mr. Pitts, so we've heard that the standard has gone on for 7 years. There's obviously stakeholders from many different parts of the industry contributing and giving their own concerns and opinions on how we should write the standard. How do you feel that's gone in its entirety? Do you believe that it's actually gotten us to a better understanding of where we're at and it was a value add, or has it been a roadblock or a hiccup, on your opinion?
Well, I'll speak to, I think, the diversity of the group as being partly responsible for both of those things. It's at the moment we've got a list of 353 participants. Now, they're all not direct participants. You've got people that are on just a mailing list. You've got a group that's referred to as liaison, who are also behind the scene. You've got member users, and we've got these are the number of people, or sorry, these are the groups that are actually voting members. So they're known as member users. We've got about a dozen of those. We've got member producers. We've got about 17. We've got members that are general interest, and that's about 13 in that group. So a total within the voting area of about 45 voting members at the moment. And that can change with adding additional people or for other reasons. But generally, I think it's the diversity of an interest, the diversity of interest as well in what we do and in the standard itself has partly driven the length of time that it has taken to come to agreement on part of the standard so far. And I certainly hope that that level of agreement and interest continues. But with so many varying opinions, which we always take into account, it does take time to filter through, and it has taken time to filter through. to a point where we're starting to bring it to a conclusion.
Thank you so much, Wayne. Claude, I'm just going to bounce this back to you for one quick second, if you don't mind. Obviously, in the beginning, we had what we thought was a very simple process to come up with a standard, and we realized as we got into it, it became much more convoluted. And to that end, I believe that we've actually come up with what we would call a much smaller piece of the standard. That was the first thing that we got approved. Can you talk to us about the reasoning for coming up with an abbreviated version of the G-27 outside of taking it as its whole as we initially intended?
Yes, certainly. Indeed, the scope of the standard as released is at the moment considering the test of batteries inside a package only for the category of batteries, the lithium-ion cylindrical cells of limited size. So indeed, it does not represent all the categories of batteries that are shipped by air, but only a sub part. And the reason is that, as already mentioned previously, a lot of tests were requested to have everybody really understanding and agreeing on the level of hazard that can be expected from this thermal runaway reaction of lithium batteries and how it can be protected. These were mainly initially conducted on this category of cells, so small lithium-ion cylindrical cells. For that reason, the committee was much more confident that we could indeed release this part of the standard without waiting for more testing confirmation or more discussions about other categories of product which are at the moment not yet part of the scope. And this include, for example, other format of cells like prismatic or the so-called pouch cells, which are, let's say, cells with non-rigid casings, and also various categories of batteries assembly, and so on, which are at the moment also not yet part of the scope of the standard as released. Indeed, we will have to talk and continue our activity since now this first part of the standard has been released. It seems that the committee has a better understanding, more confidence on how the final document could look like, and the discussions are at the moment continue progressing in a quite good pace to complete this scope.
Mr. Pitts, so we've gotten our first pass on the limited scope, but we've also been putting a lot of work into the slash sheets. Can you talk to us briefly about what those slash sheets are, how somebody could apply them, and what they detail?
Yep, certainly. The slash sheets are quite important. The job of what we call the slash sheet, and I'll use as an example the AS 6413 slash sheet. It has AI air in front of the document itself, and that tells us that it is not the main part of the standard, but it usually is there to provide additional information, so anybody can pick it up and read it through, and it provides all the rationales, all the information, for example, how to perform the tests under certain conditions, all the aspects, the test apparatus to use, the test criteria, things like the volume of the test chamber, the heating rate to use, what is a pass-fail criteria. All those sorts of things have to be included and be a part of the outcome of each and every test, and it all has to be the same. That means test laboratories, wherever they may be, who want to perform the test can do so with confidence that they're doing the right thing, because they've got all the information there. There's nothing missing when you add the two documents together to allow a successful test and a successful evaluation of the packaging and of the battery performance, that kind of thing, as it's tested.
If I may add, Chris, here, in addition to the document that Wayne was mentioning about, the ARR information documents, which provide, of course, all the rationale, as Wayne just explained, We also have attached to the standards the so-called also slash sheets, which have not yet been published, but will be hopefully with the second publication, which are providing method for testing, also other conditions of the package, not only the risk of the fire and the thermal runaway coming from the battery inside of the package, but as well the risk of having the batteries getting in thermal runaway because of an external threat. And the conditions considered here for the slash sheets, there are 2 slash sheets intended to be added to the standard. On one side, the exposure to heat, permanent heat for several hours, and the exposure to a flame. And both of these conditions are supposed to reflect the risk of a package of lithium batteries being transported in a cargo aircraft where a fire is occurring, and a fire is contained by the aircraft safety systems, but still having a place where the package could be exposed to either heat or flame. And these also are called additive slash sheets to the standard, but have not yet been released.
Yeah, Chris, and I can add on to that as well, if you don't mind. I think the idea and the goal of having these levels of other mechanisms for test methods added to the standard is so that, for instance, for approvals of either larger quantities of cells, higher states of charge, or maybe in certain conditions in transport, these other types of requirements for the package at the packaging level would be required, and then would allow the ability to transport that type of battery or those types of cells in that manner. Whereas, the baseline standard is really generally only about the thermal runaway of the cells inside the package, and can the package contain it? Well, now if we want to put this package either with larger quantities or higher states of charge into, for instance, a passenger aircraft, maybe there's a way to get an approval for that if the packaging can also pass these thermal resistance tests and the flame resistance tests. So that's really the idea behind adding those slash sheets to the standard, and hopefully that's well, we already have experience where some associate administrators and states have already allowed approvals based on these standards, even though they're not even published yet. So we're headed that direction, I think.
And to that end, Mr. Kinsala, what safety challenges do you have to consider or address when writing these standards and slash sheets for the industry as a whole?
You mean as a test lab?
Just overall.
Well, I think as both the gentlemen have pointed out on the call already, that the AIR, especially the rationale, goes through quite a bit of details regarding the safety standards of the test environment and the trained professionals that need to be trained in a certain way in order to conduct these tests. Obviously, we're dealing with charging and discharging cells, and anytime you add those up and put them into a series or any kind of complexity, then you have higher voltages that could be involved. So you have a safety issue there. Secondly, you have issues where we're actually thermally abusing a cell in order to cause a thermal runaway. So, what if the package fails? What if the test environment is not built in a way to be able to contain the effects of a failure? For instance, if the gas were to explode inside the chamber, does it have a sufficient blowout panel or pressure relief device built into it so that the test chamber does not become, a problem during the test and cause, a safety issue for the personnel involved? So you have multiple layers of issues here. And then you also have the conditioning. You're, dismantling perhaps a known good battery from a known good manufacturer, but you're installing a heater cartridge or a heating device. And when doing so, are you causing some kind of safety concern for that battery or for that cell? Yeah, you are. So from that point on, once you have this device, on your bench and you're starting to do the work on it, it's then considered, a safety issue. It needs to be stored in certain types of containers, stored in certain types of cabinets that are rated for batteries that could have this kind of issue. And then, of course, during the test and, of course, after the test, you still consider it completely suspect, even if all the cells, especially if all the cells did not go into thermal runaway. They've now been exposed to heat. Those are huge safety concerns that have to be dealt with, very appropriately.
Sure. Yeah. Mr. Pitts, Robby obviously talked to us about the safety concerns or issues in the testing labs to be able to come up with a proper standard and vet it properly. But let's just talk organically about the reason we started the standard in the beginning. What were the safety and concerns from industry that required us to start going down this road in the first place? Why was this alerted to us? Why did ICAO come to us? And why did we form this committee ultimately? What were the safety issues that the industry saw that we were trying to correct with the standard?
Well, I think it's not it's not a question of correction, but it's a correction of overall safety in transport. If you look at the standards we have today for from the UN for transporting goods such as lithium-ion batteries, they go all over the world. They have to be safe in transport, whether it be by sea or rail or road or air, and we have to make sure that there is something in place that everyone can follow. That's every shipper everywhere in the world. It's a big ask to be able to ship these products safely. When we're testing, of course, we're deliberately causing extreme damage. We're deliberately pushing the cells into thermal runaway in this case. But there are other tests as well that go along with this that are already in place. You've got drop tests from a certain height. You've got tests for packaging, internal packaging. The packaging itself, even today, still has to be qualified to a UN standard. So there is that culture of safely packaging lithium batteries in the first place. And what we're doing with this particular with this testing we're running at the moment with the SAE and have been for quite some time, is we're adding to that. We're saying, okay, you're in a certain environment, which is on board an aircraft if it's being shipped. That environment is at a great height, 30,000 feet or something above the earth. What could possibly go wrong? And once that's ascertained, what could go wrong? How do you deal with it? Or how do you prevent it in the first place? So the testing that we're doing aims to be able to prevent as well as contain and reduce risk and reduce damage. That's for sure. So those sorts of things, in general, are part and parcel of the testing that we're doing and the standard that we're bringing to bear.
I may add on this. As Wayne just explained, there are of course already standard, and this is an additive standard. But the reason why it really came up was that there were tests that did demonstrate in 2016 that the containment system from the general cargo of aircraft industry in general were potentially be overwhelmed by the consequence of the lithium batteries runaway and not able to contain the risk. And that's what initiated the need to say, well, if this event is happening, as Wayne mentioned, hopefully the industry is strongly involved in avoiding these events to happen, but in case it is happening, then there was the concern that the aircraft would be at risk because of these safety protections embedded in the design of the aircraft, not suitable to contain the risk of thermal runaway of lithium batteries. This is due to the chemical nature of this fire from the lithium batteries, the so-called thermal runaway propagation from cell to cell and battery to battery, where the usual aircraft extinguishing systems like inert gas are unable to prevent this propagation mechanism, which was in fact the initial idea raising the proposal to elaborate a packaging test. So that's the reason why we started this way, and why this standard is proposing a packaging test as one of the mitigation means to contribute and support the global safety approach of the aircraft industry.
Yeah, Chris, I think the history here is really interesting. It goes back quite a ways, but I think that, and this is based on our experience and relationship with the FAA, but after the chemical oxygen generator issues and the packaging for compressed oxygen that need to ship by air, those types of containers had been developed, which obviously includes similar features as the heat resistance test and the flame resistance test and so on and so forth. Some of that same type of packaging was starting to be tested for lithium batteries. And I think the initial response to lithium batteries was, okay, what happens when we have to do a recall? We have suspect batteries that are having safety issues in the field. We need to get them back. So we're looking at packaging that can contain the hazardous effects of a damaged defective battery that needs to be recalled. And in conducting those tests early on, I think a lot of that data started to become available. And as Claude just mentioned, the aircraft manufacturers specifically, once they realized that the cargo compartments are not capable of containing the hazard events and also not capable of continuing to suppress another fire in that cargo bay if these batteries are present. Once that data started to become available, that's when ICAO stepped in and said, okay, no more shipping these cells unless they're at 30% state of charge or lower. And also we want to have packaging standards that specifically address these hazards. And that was early on, probably in 2016. And it's taken this long to get to the point where we have published a standard, we have approvals based on the standard, and we have traction going forward for being able to ship and transport lithium batteries safely in all modes and in all types of compartments.
I can't thank you enough for bringing that up, Mr. Kinsala, but it begs the question. So we know, as a matter of fact, that the lower states of charge, the more benign a battery becomes. We all know that inherently in the cell or battery itself, there is the capability or likelihood, if something was manufactured wrong or something affected it, that there is a dangerous evolution of heat within that cell that could cause an issue. But the lower states of charge do create less and less of a hazard. I believe it's common vernacular, or at least well understood, that at 30% or even lower, that a battery is not going to have a very large thermal runaway, if any at all. So when the embargo first happened, all the battery manufacturers, I believe, decided directly off the line to only produce cells at 30% state of charge, already making it much safer to ship these cells by air as long as that state of charge was controlled. Mr. Claude Chanson, I'm asking a question. I would only imagine that some people would say, if we're shipping at 30% state of charge and everybody's adhered to that, maybe there's no need for the standard anymore. Maybe that in and itself isn't enough of a mitigation to go further into the future. What would you say to that? Do you believe the standard still has a purpose? And if so, for who and why?
Thanks for the question. Indeed, there are two aspects to the question for the purpose or the usage of the standard, this packaging standard. First of all, and Robby mentioned that already, not all lithium batteries have been created equal. And this general measure of 30% state of charge, you're perfectly right, is strongly decreasing the hazards related to the lithium battery fire or thermal runaway. This being said, we cannot guarantee that for all category of batteries, this reduction of risk is, let's say, considered as sufficient to make the transport of these batteries benign, like benign products. So that's one of the benefits of the standard is indeed it provides a test results, which is an evident demonstration, and particularly when the 30% state of charge may be used, that the hazard have been reduced. And if it is not at 30%, then this standard enable to demonstrate, for example, that this quality has been achieved when going at a lower state of charge, like 20% or whatsoever. That one aspect. The other aspect of the standard is not all batteries can be transported at low state of charge. There are, first of all, category of products which are often not so much considered, but still transported in large quantities. It's so-called primary or non-rechargeable batteries. And necessarily, these type of products are shipped 100% charged because they have never been used and cannot be recharged after use. So they have to be, of course, transported fully charged. For this category of products, then this benefit of considering the protection at the package level is very useful. And also another part of the industry is the cases where, for practical reason of use, the shipment at low state of charge is unpractical. I recognize this is not a very majority of usages. We all know that rechargeable batteries in general, when you receive a product, the first thing the manufacturer is asking to you is please plug it and recharge the battery before you. So that's something which is very general practice. But some cases, like particularly, for example, the safety devices or the medical devices need to have products being transported ready to use and not at the discharge state. So for this reason, there are practical cases where transporting at the higher state of charge and potentially using the standard as a demonstration that the package as shipped with a high state of charge is safe is an expected usage of the standard.
I can add a little bit that to Claude's statement, if you wish. When it comes to shipping primary cells, one of the biggest advantages there is actually the packaging. If you have a properly designed package which separates cell from cell, so typically you might see from primary batteries shipped when they're just all bunched in together. They fit as many cells as possible into a package. They fit as many cells as possible into a package, and then ship it that way. The better way is to provide a separation material. It can be there's many different ways of providing that. So you could have perhaps one cell could, through an accident or some nature, go into thermal runaway, but it won't affect all the cells surrounding it because it is physically separated. I know of one incident that occurred in an airport in a country south of America, let's put it that way, and a forklift had actually gone through the box and crushed several cells. It was only those cells were affected because they were separated from all the other cells and the packaging was not completely destroyed. So it still was able to do its job. That's just one, I suppose, one method proven that it will provide some form of separation. Does have a big effect in protecting cells from that kind of mechanical damage.
Yeah, Chris, I think it's interesting that you raise this question. I think you bring up a touchy subject. I think we're kind of dancing around it a little bit. As Claude mentioned, as Wayne mentioned, there's definitely practical examples already where their cells are, there's a reason why they can survive and be shipped in regular packaging or packaging that is safe. Also, the state of charge issue is, there's clearly reasons why we need to ship things at 100% state of charge or near that, especially for the medical device industry, but even in other industries. I think one of the issues that gets brought up quite a bit, sometimes it's by the regulators, but also by maybe even the aircraft manufacturers, is how do we verify that the cells are actually at 30% or lower? And in some cases, it's hard to do that, not in the sense that it's impossible, but in the sense that the people, let's just call it a middleman, like a distributor, who doesn't have manufacturing, they don't manufacture the cells, they don't even use the cells or the batteries, but they are responsible for stocking them, preparing them for transport, and either retransporting them after they've already been inventoried and stocked, or in some cases even used before. And so they're offering these goods for transport and do not have the capability or their expertise to be able to verify that they're at 30% state of charge. Yeah, we all know that tier one manufacturers, they comply with the ICAO regulations already. They're shipping at 30% state of charge, but we also know and recognize that there are times when they're not being shipped at 30% state of charge when they're supposed to be. And so I think from an aircraft manufacturer standpoint of view and a regulator standpoint of view, they're still looking towards having certain requirements for this type of packaging regardless, especially in certain modes and especially on certain types of aircraft.
Those are all great answers. I know that every one of us, I believe, has been a part of this G-27 standard since the very beginning. That's 7 years of our lives that we've dedicated to this, right? There's been a lot of infighting, there's been a lot of logic, there's been a lot of back and forth, but I think ultimately trying to get to the greater good of where we're going to be. And knowing that we've only taken a bite out of this and there's a lot of work left to do, there is an eagerness for this standard to actually have impact, to have implications, and for a good chunk of our lives worth of work, see it being implemented properly. Mr. Chanson, could you briefly discuss for anybody that's listening and talk us through what are the next steps? After we've gotten the first part published, who do we hand that off to? What do they have to evaluate? And ultimately, what are now the timelines, even with just the partial standard that we've written, are people to expect before this becomes regulation or can be actually applicable and used for all the work that we've done?
Yes, that's a question that indeed raised a lot of comments inside the committee as well for many years. And we see the benefit of having a first release of the standard. As we said previously, this only a part of the complete piece, but only addressing a very limited scope. But the benefit is that this standard being published, then a method is available and a test approach to demonstrate the containment of the hazard is available. This is already a huge achievement, I would like to underline, because this was indeed the answer of this group, representing industry and authorities, to the question raised, can we have a test that demonstrates safety? We have a test, it can demonstrate safety if passed. So how to use it, that's the big question you raised now. Who will be, who do we recommend to look at it and use it? Of course, the first one is the regulators, because starting from the beginning, this started with the ICAO request to SAE, and therefore there is expectation that now ICAO is recognizing the existence of this standard as a document and consider using it potentially, as you mentioned, for regulation. Our understanding is that at the moment, it's certainly too early to consider that this document as itself would be part of a regulation. What is considered is how to use this document in the regulation by using the technical content of it as a technical demonstration or proof that some targets or some containment have been achieved by this package as submitted or verified according to the standards. That's already a good step forward. In addition, we can expect, of course, that the authorities, when they face a situation where they need indeed to have a specified condition of transport for products which are requesting authorization, then they also can use the document as a technical base to verify safety properties of a package for specific transport conditions. And finally, I guess there will be an impact on all the industry by the fact that this document has been released, because it contains a method, it contains new equipment, it contains a new approach to verify the hazard of lithium batteries that may be used not only for necessarily the air transport, but the transport in general, or even the safety in general, because the criteria used are fundamentally quite innovative. They are altogether checking the risk of gas explosion, gas flammability, and as was mentioned also previously, the potential risk of heat, fire, flame release, or particle release. So all of these are part of the standard, and the benefit of this document should in fact clarify the technical criteria to consider what is called a safe package or a very safe package for any type of use in the industry.
Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for being on the call today. I have probably about 30 or 40 more questions I could go through, and maybe if enough people watch this, we can come back and answer more questions. But I thought this was very thoughtful, had plenty of insight, and I can't thank you enough. Hopefully y'all come back and speak to us again about this standard, because I do believe it is for the greater good. I do believe the work that we put into it has a true resolution that is going to have impact to the industry and safety worldwide. Thank you very much for your time.